Ngemba Ngalan project?
First, we would like to start off by giving an acknowledgement. We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first people of Australia. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. In collaboration with the Burke community, we acknowledge the Ngemba, Marawari, Budgety and Barkindji tribes and pay our respect to their elders past and present. Together with the Indigenous community of Burke, we present to you our vision for a better Australia.
Hi, my name is Simran and I'm one of the team managers of this project. So, Ngemba Ngalan program, it's a not-for-profit organization made up of 5 team project developers. Our key aim is to implement diversionary methods effective at reducing youth offending rates in the town of Burke. So our focus group is youth at risk. So what do we mean by that? I would like to begin by bringing to your attention the overwhelming number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community members currently in our penal justice system. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders comprise only about 2% of Australia's general population, but according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, in 2017, they represented a distressing 28% of the total prison population. These alarming statistics extend to the youth as well. According to that same report, it was found that Indigenous children aged 10 to 17 are 18 times more likely to be under judicial supervision than a non-Indigenous person from that same age group. Whilst their cohort represents only 5% of the total general population, similar to the adult statistics, Indigenous youth make up almost half of those under youth justice supervision. We use this information to provide further evidence to an already persistent issue of the overrepresentation of Indigenous youth in contact with the criminal justice system, whether it be through detention, custody, or remand. Now, I would like to present some research as to why this societal issue has been occurring for years. However, before I begin, I would like to inform you all that the following slides and information that I am about to present are sensitive in their nature, and they hold a great importance to the Indigenous community's history. Therefore, please understand that Indigenous Elder Fiona Smith of the Burke region was generous enough to give her permission to allow me to speak on the following matters. And in respect to the Indigenous community, we disclaim that the following may contain images of deceased members that may cause sadness or distress. So the history. According to the Victorian Aboriginal Justice Agreement 2019, the current state of Indigenous overrepresentation finds its source in the colonialism period of Australia's history. The exercise of power and control by European settlers over the Indigenous communities resulted in, but not limited to, the following problems. Firstly, the concept of terra nullius, no man's land, established by the settlers, resulted in the dispossession of Indigenous land and their ownership titles to that land. Secondly, colonization by way of forcing the Indigenous communities to assimilate to European ways resulted in the disruption of their own culture. In doing so, the Indigenous communities faced great social exclusion and racial prejudice, as they were no longer the prominent group. These actions had a ripple effect that can be seen in the poverty that Indigenous communities face to this day. So I would now like to take the time to expand on our understanding of the ripple effect. A report by the Australian Law Reform Commission gives 2 consequences to colonization: far-reaching and intergenerational. They were far-reaching as consequences continue to have an impact upon the lives of Indigenous people to this day. This has already been shown by the statistics that detail their interactions with the criminal justice system, which prove that they are an overrepresented majority in our criminal institutions. The consequences are also intergenerational, and this is where Ngemba Ngalan program's concern lies, as this issue of overrepresentation is also present in our Indigenous youth. But in order for us to create a plan that is dynamic, well-integrated, and efficient in combating youth overrepresentation, we begin by presenting the main patterns of youth offending behavior present in Indigenous communities. So the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare presented research that highlighted certain socioeconomic factors as influencing engagement in crime. Firstly, the high rates of unemployment present in the Indigenous community. This research shows that half of all first-time offenders are unemployed at the time of their arrest. More alarmingly, Aboriginal unemployment is at 14%, and that is more than double the rate of unemployment for non-Aboriginals. The unemployment rate is even higher amongst the Aboriginal youth population. Secondly, the AIHW found a correlation between offending behavior and the use of illicit and licit substances amongst the Indigenous community. They found that 65% of young Indigenous offenders detained on a criminal sentence or placed in remand had a history of alcohol and illicit drug use. Even more so, 82% of young Indigenous offenders attributed their offending to substance use. So this is where we come in. Taking into account all of this information, this is where Ngemba and Ngalan programs comes in. We analyze these external and internal factors that have shown to influence youth offending behavior, and we have designed a program based off of proven effective methods, as well as new, innovative methods to help combat the youth offending rates in the town of Burke. So why Burke? Young people aged 10 to 17 are 6 times more likely to be under judicial supervision than those from major cities. This statistic has informed our main target group of 10 to 17-year-olds. In 2017, more than 36% of young people under this supervision were from the lowest socioeconomic areas as compared to the 5% that arise from the highest. This data has influenced us to allocate our resources to remote communities such as the one in Burke. Now, based off of this information, Vivian will explain why Burke has been chosen as the starting place for our project. Thank you.
My name is Vivian and I am a project developer for the Ngemba and Ngalan project. Our objectives is to reduce the crime rates, educate Indigenous about the potential risk, build a strong community, give the Indigenous individuals skills necessary in life, and provide support to benefit the Indigenous community. Our objectives of the NNP aligns closely with the interests and priorities of the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice, and also the Family and Community Services. Both these departments both aim to provide support to the Indigenous community. Our target population is to the Indigenous people of Burke, and we focus on the Indigenous youth. I'll now pass this over to Julie.
Hi, my name is Julie and I'm a representative of the project developer for the program of Ngemba and Ngalan project. I would like to start off with the background of Burke community. Burke is located in 800 kilometres northwest of New South Wales and Darling River. This situated town forms part of the traditional area for the Ngemba, Murawari, Budjati and Bakinji tribes. In effect of the Aboriginal policies in the 1920s of Australia, the relocation and removals of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders has resulted in 21 different tribes residing and living in Burke. This project emerged due to Burke having one of the most disadvantaged areas with rates of juvenile crime as the highest in New South Wales. It can be evident in the interview we made in which local community teen who was born and raised in Burke, Indigenous background, states nearly everyone in my family have been in and out of either juvenile or have been locked up or arrested. How the project was conducted. We went out to the local community of Burke and posted on community halls, schools, churches, and announced in community events throughout the period of 2 weeks. A project to help Indigenous youth community of Burke was to be conducted in their area. We invited and welcomed all Indigenous people to the event and held to celebrate Indigenous peoples and introduce to them a project for their people, which is designed and decided by the Indigenous people themselves. The interested persons were brought forward and discussed how a board of Indigenous leaders would be voted upon by their people in the community to represent the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples for the decision-making process. This was funded by the local churches and community council. This is an example of the flyers that we created, that we posted across community halls. The day of the event. During this day, Indigenous people displayed paintings created by the Indigenous Burke community themselves. Dancing and music of cultural and heritage significance was displayed. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander food stalls were made by the Indigenous people of Bourke, and the introduction of the project was introduced to the Bourke community. To inform Indigenous leaders to consult and be voted by the Indigenous people of the community was also dictated as well. This is now the formation of the Board of Indigenous Makers, in which Indigenous people decided themselves. These are also other representatives and organisations, stakeholders that hold interest within the program. This includes us ourselves, the advocates for Indigenous youth, and manager Corinne herself. Question is, during this we did a research to be conducted by the youth for the youth. During this we questioned 2 specific questions, which was, what would you like to see happen for the benefit of Indigenous youth in your community? And do you have any concerns when the program's initiatives run? The responses to these questions by the Indigenous youth, which for example, one commented, a 12-year-old Aboriginal stated that he wanted a place to have where he could play with his friends. One who was also a Torres Strait Islander at the age of 16 stated something to teach us how to start driving. These are just one of the many examples of the comments made. Other comments that were also made were regards to safety issues, which was stated by the 15-year-old Torres Strait Islander who stated, if our parents knew we were safe, then we would be allowed to go. It's all up to them if I can join or not. These issues raised by the youth, which was both permission from parents and guardians as well as safety, was resolved through our resolution of setting up meetings to have with parents, guardians, to become part of the program and have a say in changes to the community. Hold an orientation to invite parents, guardians, and community of Bourke to introduce and inform them of the changes that are about to happen and the details of the program. In regards to safety issues, we would hire out buses for the safe transportation of youth to and from the hall venue, as well as give the children and parents and guardians the bus timetables and the routes of the buses to and from the hall. This is the overview of the scheduled meetings and conferences that were held during the month of the project. The initiatives and programs were then designed by the Indigenous Bourke community in partnership with organisations and stakeholders, including ourselves. The Ngemba Ngalan program. Ngalan meaning flame or light in the Ngemba language. Ngemba is the Aboriginal tribe in the community of Bourke, named and agreed by the Indigenous community of Bourke. The background of this project. Ngemba Ngalan program is a non-for-profit organisation. We are based in the town of Bourke in Upper New South Wales, and our focus is the prevention of young Indigenous residents of Bourke, providing diversionary and substantive programs that engage with the youth and reduce crime-related behaviour. Where would this happen? Location is within the community of Bourke at the Diggers Function Centre, which is easy access as well for the community. This holds a capacity of 400 people within a community hall, chosen by the leaders of the community to be hired out on days specific to run the programs and initiatives introduced by them. Our difference. The difference between our programs and the many programs that have been running, such as the Maramuka project, is that it was evident within this project of Maramuka that they had failed in the Indigenous youth of Bourke through reasons of admissions of drug and alcohol related reasons. Our change is to cater all our resources to this specific focus group and make sure that no resources are steered away. Our board of decision makers will also be Indigenous leaders voted by the community, as well as youth who are suitable for this. Now I'll pass it around to Corinne to introduce our development plan.
Hi, my name's Corinne. I am the manager. So our development plan, we have looked into many programs and gained insight into what may or may not work for our program. So from research, it was decided to run with a bottoms-up approach instead of a bottoms-down approach. This gives youth to have a voice and have their own suggestions. This can lead to them being more inclined to stick with the program and also it gives them a chance to be heard, and certain activities that they do have interest in will be implemented. So we'll be working with the schools to make sure that the students are attending and participating in all aspects of the education. This means that if they are not, they will not be allowed to participate in events such as our football day. The reason behind this is due to the rates of having 40% of Indigenous youth between the ages of 15 and 19 who were in school in 2016 compared to 77% for non-Indigenous. And also in between the ages of 5 to 14, it was only 84% for Indigenous. We hope by doing this that we can up the percentage whilst lowering the rate of offences being committed. So some of the educational activities that we will be putting into our program is tutoring for homework, cultural paintings, also maybe spear making. We also will be having different topics on rotation each week, and some of these topics will be drug, alcohol, mental health, finances, how to save and budget, and sex education. On another one of our given days, on a Saturday, we will be having driving programs, which will be alternated every fortnight. And then we'll go into sporting activities. We have found that having an after-school activity or weekend activity can reduce the boredom, which is a well-known contribution to youth committing crime. We'll also be implementing a lot of sporting activities within our program, with gym being available for the youth, having indoor sports on our Friday nights, such as indoor soccer, indoor cricket, and a footy day on Saturday where we'll be working with the local police. The reason for having the sporting event with the police will be to build confidence and trust. We looked into a program within Bundaberg, Queensland, and it was set up to have youth and police do boxing, which gave police opportunity to be mentors to the youth, and this gave insight into what the police role is and why youth were also committing crime. This resulted in a positive outcome for the youth and relationships with police, so we're hoping for the same outcome. I will now pass it on to Ahmad, and he will speak further about our mentors.
Hi, my name is Ahmad and I'm a representative of the program. Mentors will play a key role in this to help the youth along the way. They will identify as Indigenous heritage and either be an elder or youth. For the educational section of the program, as a team we plan to get into contact with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander panel, a panel that consists of members made up of community and industry professionals. The panel's members are from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds who live, work and study in the local area. Introducing members of the panel into our program will allow the youth in our program to have the advantage of a mentor who can help guide the youth from going down a path that will result in a life of crime that will down the track impact them severely. The first mentor who volunteered to join the program is Sarah Hamilton. Sarah is passionate about working with the Indigenous community. Her passion can be seen in her past volunteer and community engagements that include coordinating the Inner City Native Family and Sports Day, volunteering for the Redfern All Blacks Rugby League Club, and participating in the Inner City Aboriginal Women's Consultative Group and the National Aboriginal Sporting Chance Academy mentoring program. Another mentor who also volunteered to join the program is the co-chairman of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander panel of New South Wales, Ryan Donahoe-Pitt. Ryan Donahoe-Pitt is a proud Dungari and Torres Strait Islander man who grew up on the mid-north coast in Kempsey. Ryan has studied the Bachelor of Business Administration at the University of Technology, Sydney. He was a Project and Policy Officer at Empowered Communities, a program which provides a platform for Indigenous people in inner Sydney to unite with one voice to design and direct tailored solutions for the community's needs. His passion for bettering his community is the reason why we have approached him, as both our goals are the same. With both Sarah and Ryan's achievements and heavy engagement with the Indigenous community, our group thought they would be the perfect mentors to introduce to the program, as they will provide insight on education on the youth on our Wednesday night sessions that will hopefully motivate the youth in our program to seek education. This will better the youth and help them work toward their future and steer them clear from coming into contact with the criminal justice system. Another member from the advisory panel that has offered to take part in our program and will be effective in the mentor section is Stephen Sator. Stephen is Yakun Chajara from Central Australia. Stephen is a driven Indigenous entrepreneur and the founder of Iwara Travel Australia. Stephen has over 10 years experience in marketing, event and project management across various sectors, including education, not-for-profit, tourism, employment and small business. He has an achieved history of working with Indigenous artists and groups to achieve results that positively impact the Indigenous communities' social and economic welfare. Stephen believes that by celebrating and embracing Indigenous cultures, it will bring all Australians together. Stephen's strong belief in embracing Indigenous cultures will construct the foundation of our mentorship section of the program, as it will encourage the youth to embrace their culture. Sarah, Ryan and Stephen are perfect mentors for our program, as they come from different tribes and educational backgrounds that will help in educating the youth on different pathways available out there for future and help deter these youth from coming into contact with the criminal justice system. I will now pass it back to Vivian.
So the funding for our project will require $200,000 for the whole project. $75,000 will go for the minibuses to transport the Indigenous youth to and from the program back to their houses. A company car for the Indigenous youth to learn how to drive. Educational resources, $200. $150 for advertisements such as brochures, flyers and the banners. $500 for sports recreation equipment for activities. $43,200 for 12 weeks hall hire. A total of $18,816 for the staff members in the project. $2,000 for additional resources such as food, petrol, and leeway of $35,000 or $134. The limitations of our project is that we are a non-for-profit organisation, which means we could run out of funding. The Indigenous community may not come to the program, and if they do come, there's a risk of them not sticking to the project. To overcome the limitations, we would gain income through $5 entry fee for non-Indigenous individuals. We would also hold fundraising events such as sausage sizzles and events such as football to police. We would also have Cadbury chocolate fundraising. We would also invite parents to hold orientation events and hold events for the whole community to watch. And we would also have suggestion boxes and feedback boxes to allow the Indigenous youth to share their opinions, and we would have performance evaluations every 3 months. The future development goals and developments of our project is to eventually build our own centre for the Indigenous community, expand to other areas to support the Indigenous community and the Indigenous youth at risk, and run the program longer for more sustainability.
On behalf of our representative of group project developers, I would like to hand over to our manager to say a few words of, thank you guys for your time.
So speaking on behalf of our members and being a manager, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time to see what we have to offer with the program and the reason why we want to implement the program. And we hope if you have any other questions for our team that you will send it forward to us. And thank you.